Hey guys, this is Tom Box. Lights are off today because we're not going to be seeing most of the set anyway, and to not waste any of your time, today's episode of Meta Trends, we're going to go over the most popular side deck cards that I've seen people play and talk about how they're going to be used in the most popular matchups in a quick video. This is going to be quick and dirty, so make sure you guys smash thumbs up button, hit subscribe, ding notification bell, and let's just get to it. For some of the most well-performing decks of the past week, we have Flanders, Branded, Sword Soul. Newest in the line, we have Sun Avalon, Eldritch, of course, still around. We have Brave Engine decks, and as for Therians, this counts for Psychics, Sun Avalon, ABCs, and Earth Machines. Basically, it's a combo deck with, I guess, one more additional negate on top of that. So this is what we're going to be talking about, and we're going to talk about the most popular hand traps I've seen so far being used against these decks. Our lineup includes Antispell Fragments, Dimensional Barrier, Evenly Matched, the Nibiru, Twin Twisters, Zombie World, and Dark Ruler No More. And Dark Ruler No More is only going to get more popular as the combo deck starts to dominate in this format. But, you know, enough about me talking about that. You guys want to jump back to testing, so let's jump into Anti-Spell Fragments. Anti-Spell Fragments, across the board, this applies to like Flanders and everyone else, which is, it does slow down consistency cards like pot cards and maybe some of the search cards that you have. But if there's a natural out within the main deck, it just kind of falls short when it comes to stunning out your opponent. It might even ruin your own turn, so sometimes you don't want to consider anti-spell. So against Flanders, it's a maybe. You can stop like their pot cards, like consistency cards, but they are monster dependent. If they go off with their monster, you're still going to lose that anti-spell fragrance. Against, say, Branded, yes, this is a really good card because you just stun them out. You just basically flip it as the first thing you do and then hope that they don't have Twin Twisters for this card, because let's face it, even with Super Poly, even with Branded Open, you don't really care that they have those cards because they don't have anything to really summon after the fact. They can't use their Branded Fusion. They're just kind of locked out. And they can't even use Branded in red on the opening turn because there's nothing in the graveyard for them to actually add back. So there's that going for them. So Anti-Spell Fragments, definitely one of the better choices here. Sword Soul, it's kind of pointless. If they open all monsters, you're going to lose the Anti-Spell Fragments very, very quickly. Sun Avalon, mainly just stopping for the unexpected die, but outside of that, I don't think there's too much going for it. Eldritch, they're just going to send it away. Just trust me, they're just going to set 5. They play the set 5 game, they don't really care. Against the Brave Engine, I think it's actually quite good against it because they are not able to set up properly if they can't use their right, if the right's kind of stunned under Anti-Spell Fragments. You slow them down for like an entire turn. I still think that is worth it. And as for Therian, it's also the kind of same deal. It's like kind of a stun. It's decent against Psychic decks, and not so great. I mean, if they have E-Telly, they have E-Telly. They're going to be able to kind of just plow right through the board. It's decent at best. It's good against like the ABC Therian deck though, because that deck runs way too many spells, way too many field spells, and just very difficult to even kick off a combo under anti-spell. So judge your Therian decks based off of what it can be used against. And let's move on to D-Barrier. D-Barrier, good for stunning out extra deck based strategies except for links, and that just means that against Flanders it's completely useless. They throw that out like no tomorrow, so don't side it in, of course. And then, of course, against the Branded deck, it's really, really good if we call fusions. However, it's not the end of the world. You might have stopped their aggression from pushing through, but their defensive plays can still hold the board simply by setting a Branded in red or Super Poly, and then they do the fusion during your turn. It's not going to be fun for you in that case, so you have to prepare for that by having the appropriate follow-up after you D-Barrier. Against the Sword Soul deck, just remember to call Synchro, and you should be most likely safe, especially when the follow-up no longer has an Aurora Dawn. It does make things a lot easier, but they're also no slouch when it comes to monsters with big bodies. Since the 10-year package, most of those monsters have at least 2,500 defense that you're going to have to ram right through. And not to mention the follow-up game is also pretty strong if they don't actually engage into their extra deck. Against an Avalon, it's completely useless. They mainly focus on link summoning. Against Eldritch, they don't care about their extra deck, so that's going to be a useless matchup. Against Brave Engine, now the Brave Engine decks, you got to consider what else they play with it, and in some cases, if it's going to be the decks that play Synchros, then yeah, you can call Synchros, and you can really just mitigate some of the problems, especially when you see a Red Rose Dragon come out. Like Red Rose, this is for the Brave Psychic deck, or rather the Brave Punk deck. They are capable of generating basically the same old boards just as well. Sure, it might not have a DPE attached at the end, but at the end of the day, you know, an unbreakable board is still an unbreakable board. And if this one's synchro based going into Barret, I mean, you still have value depending on what they play. So just be very careful. Against Therian is actually the one really good thing that bypasses D barrier. I've gotten D barrier before, and simply just by playing just strictly Brave Engine plus the Therian package, it wasn't enough to hold the board to actually get the turn back. So D barrier kind of losing a little bit of advantage over this format. And as for evenly match, against Flanders, it's a solid board wipe. They don't play counter traps normally, but if they do, it's going to cost them half their life to protect their board. And at that point, is it worth it? What if you have a second copy? But it's just nice to wipe them off the face of the earth. Against Fallen of Alba's branded deck, I still think it's worth playing it. Yeah, sure, they're going to activate their branded and summon everything, but you're reducing the amount of disruptions that they have. And that's also very important because you're not eating a Chimera to the face and giving them like a draw 2, and you're probably not going to be giving them the additional banish from Mirror Jade, because they could have a Mirror Jade that's on the field face up already, and you don't have to eat a second effect of that. So you're just dealing with one Mirror Jade at this point. Against Sword Soul, it's a bait and wipe. You have to deal with the Baron first and wiping them. If they committed into a board, they would have lost a couple of cards. Good Sword Soul players, they know how to commit, and they know how to like use Adhara and their Tenyi monsters to go back into like Boxia to revive their cards. So just be very careful. They do have follow-ups. Against the Sun Avalon deck, it's really hard. They have Rose Whip, so in other words, if this card does not successfully go through and they use the Regulus to negate you, it doesn't work. So you can't activate any more spell or trap cards. It's basically a done deal at this point. So I don't know if this is worth playing against them. I'd rather break their board before they got to that point by just hand trapping them. Then there is Eldritch. Yeah, just get that full wipe or make them pay half their life with a Solemn. That's fine too. I think it's always worth it because it is a true threat after all. If it successfully resolves, you win the game. And against Brave Engine, it's a bait and wipe. And if you throw Therian on top of that, there's just way too many negates at that point. So that's kind of my rundown on Evenly Match. If it's a combo deck or like a back row deck, this is probably one of the best cards. That's why it's so played everywhere right now. Nibiru, everyone's favorite rock, it's back. Against Flanders, it does nothing. Albaz more or less does nothing. They don't really hit that summon threshold normally anyway. Against the Sword Soul deck, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, they might have a negate ahead of time. That makes it very difficult if they start with a long end. And sometimes they can actually extend through. Then there is the Sun Avalon deck. I would use a Nibiru against the second Heartbeat. It is probably one of the best choices, although I would prefer to use a DD Crow on the vanilla, especially when they go for the twin trying to summon it back from the graveyard. You just crow it out of the graveyard, and then that hurts a lot. But unless they decided to, you know, use a, what's that card called, you know, the Unexpected Die, then you probably want a Nib instead, because you want to wipe that board before things get really out of control. And yeah, they also have a one-turn skill drain, which is pretty painful. Against Eldritch, they don't summon enough for you to use it. Against the Brave Engine, I would actually consider it. It does require a little bit of baiting for sure, but ultimately under the same category, Therian. If they put Regulus out, you still should use it just so that they don't have as many negates. But that really depends, because if they have more Therian monsters, if they negate it from hand, then yeah, you're not trading away the Regulus anymore. So yeah, consider your own judgment there, but definitely consider using Dark Ruler more for these matchups, because that's the one card that I don't think there's proper response by anyone that's like a full monster based board. So yeah, I think Dark Ruler is kind of where this one kicks in. Alright, Twin Twisters, one of the most common removal, and I think it's one of the best removals right now because it gives you a little bit more control over what you kind of take out. Feather Duster is also very common because it's just massive board wipe, but there's not really too much to talk about there. But for Twin Twisters, by default, the interesting part is it's the counter side to the Zombie World and the Antispell Fragments. I think it's necessary. If you're going to be losing to those cards, having a Twin Twister safety net is one of the things that lets you continue to play. And if you don't draw, you don't draw. But if you draw into it, it means basically the difference between being able to actually counterattack someone that's floodgating you or not. Against Flanders, it's great. Just go in standby phase and pop the back row that's set and pop the field spell, so you get yourself a little bit more of a wiggle room to play before you get like fully on countered by every single play. Against the branded deck, I still think it's worth hitting like the back row. You can maybe hit into a super poly. It reduces interaction if you hit into the branded in red, because if they want to do the fusion play, they basically do it now, and then the Guardian Chimera loses value. You're just trying to reduce the amount of value that your opponent has in terms of follow-up when it comes to that. Sword Soul, it really doesn't really matter. They don't play that many back row to begin with. And against Sun Avalon, this one's a huge maybe. It's pretty bad because of Rose Whip. Rose Whip will lock you out of any more spells and traps, and they probably have Regulus. So not the most popular trade, I would say. I think this is one that you probably have to bait before you do anything, but it's something that you can maybe use. I think it's just kind of mediocre. Eldritch, I think this one gives you a lot of control because you can take out the floodgates, or if you're in mid interaction, take out a golden land card, and that's going to keep your interaction safe and you can keep moving forward. And as for the branded, so not branded, but the Brave and the Therian, not really too much to go there. I think Twin Twister is still very useful against the Therian stuff because I really don't like fighting against that field spell. That field spell, okay, I can tell you a funny game that happened, which is I opened with basically 2 of my Regulus and 2 field spell, and add 2 Ash. And then I survived and won the game just simply with the Therian stuff. So it's really powerful if they can't even do battle damage to you, or like can't break your board and you keep cycling the same giant beat stick over and over again. It gets pretty old. It's like the old school Barbaros decks. Finally, Zombie World. It's more useful than you think. Against the Flanders, of course, it is the auto win button. They need Cosmic Cyclone. Once you break their big birds, it's over. They can't beat you anymore because all their birds are weenies. Against Albaz, branded deck, not very good. I mean, if you play the Nether Soul Dragon style like fusions, then maybe, but the deck themselves, they side it, so it doesn't affect them at all. That's what I can say. Then there is Sword Soul. Sword Soul is actually pretty decent if you Zombie World against them. It's just kind of weird how it works against them because they lose access to certain monsters. They can't go into the Burning Longyan. They can't get access to Chisha because you need worm monsters. They don't have access to Boxia because that also requires a worm monster. It does lock them out from a bunch of stuff, but the problem is they can still probably go into a Baron and still pop this card. So that's kind of weird. Against an Avalon, there's no plants, so they can't link into proper things. It's really funny, so they're gonna have to find some way to actually pop this card firsthand. Otherwise, it's going to be downhill from there. And against Eldritch, it's really bad because they're already zombies. Against Brave, they don't really care about typing. And against Therian, it does matter against Therians because Therians require you to activate target the type. However, if you're playing like Therian Psychic or a deck that has a lot more Therians than the other type in the deck, then I would say then it doesn't really bother you too much. You're just stuck equipping only Therian monsters at that point. So that's the Zombie World catcher. And there's also a lot of other good things against that you can use Zombie World against, such as like you can use against Drytrons, you can use against Tri-Brigade. Funny enough, you use that against Tri-Brigade, they will lose because they can't banish anything, which hurts them, and it makes it very difficult for them to trying to even go into like Shureg or any of those monsters. It's very, very difficult. So that's why Zombie World is really, really solid. It can just be like an activation of Zombie World, and immediately it gets so awkward for the opponent that they don't really know how to respond to that. So that's why this is like super, super important, and that's why of course this includes like Necroworld Banshee. If you can play it, if you have a way to dump it into the graveyard, like a Necroworld Banshee, then it definitely play this card. I think it's just very, very underrated. And even against ABCs can't play through a Zombie World. They can't equip anything because everything is zombie and everything requires a name. In other words, they have a lot of dead cards if you put Zombie World into the side deck and activate it. It's really difficult. So they're gonna have to rely on Therian, and Therian's also kind of cut short. So they're really only have one really good option, which is the Water Enchantress stuff. So that's Zombie World for you. That's all I got for this meta trend video. I was going to cover more combo-oriented stuff and how to break combos, but it's like 2 in the morning, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to give you guys enough time to practice, and hopefully this is something that you guys prepare for the upcoming tournament. And good luck to all of you guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, smash that thumbs up button. If you guys want to see more stuff like this on MST.TV or other crazy videos, more combo-oriented videos, smash that subscribe button, ding that notification bell, and we've got I guess we have a box battle coming up, so stay tuned for that as well. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next one.